November 13th Audit Committee. We're convened as of 2 p.m. I'd respectfully ask everyone attending the meeting to mute yourself unless you're recognized to speak. Please note that the committee meetings of the RTD Board of Directors will be held remotely via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website. During today's meeting, we are providing communication access real-time translation, also known as CART. Anyone who would like to access this service should send an email to the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com, and a link will be provided. Additionally, the CART transcript can be automatically translated into Spanish for anyone who would like access to a live transcript of this meeting in Spanish. A live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. I'm now going to call the roll for committee members. Jim Brendel, are you here, Jim? Yes, I see you.
I'm here.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Vince Busick is here. Bobby Deschel.
Here.
I don't see you, Bobby, but I hear you. Okay. John Olenberger.
Working on getting to a stable place to have video.
Okay, because we really want to see you, Bobby. So come on. And Peggy Catlin, of course, joining us from beautiful downtown.
No downtown.
Okay.
We're on 4.5 acres.
So, yeah. So I see that we have all of the committee members present, and we also have Director Guzman present. Any other members of the board of directors? Well, I just see
Chair Busick, Patrick O'Keefe.
Oh, hi, Patrick. I didn't see you. So yeah, thanks. Welcome. Patrick O'Keefe is also here. Great. With that being said, we're going to move on to public comment. I'd like to open the public comment section of the meeting to anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the public meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comments or responses. However, if you would like to be contacted regarding your public comment, please email the RTD board at rtd.directors@rtd-denver.com. Mr. Kroll, are there any people looking to be recognized?
Committee Chair Busick, this is Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. There is no one present who wishes to be recognized to provide public comment, and no emailed comments were submitted for this committee in advance.
Okay, with that being said, we're going to close the public comment period at this time and move on to our first agenda item, our external entities report. There's one external entity report on the agenda for the external auditor pre-audit communications. And I would like to ask Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer, to introduce this item and our guests from Plant Moran. Kelly?
Thank you, Chair Busick and members of the Audit Committee. This first item is the required pre-audit communication from our external auditors. I'd like to welcome Pam Hill, who is a partner with Plant Moran, RTD's external auditor, and Amy Tytar, who is a manager on the engagement. I have heard that Pam, Amy, and their team have done a fantastic job for RTD over the past 5 years. I would like to thank them for their continued partnership. They will walk the committee through the planned audit scope, key focus areas, and the engagement timeline, as well as required communications. So with that, I will turn it over to Pam to present.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. I appreciate it. Great to see everybody again. It's hard to believe it's time for another audit, but we are excited to present our plan to you all and get any feedback that you all might have as we head into actually our timing is this week is some of our interim procedures. So the timing of the meeting is perfect. Amy, do you want to maybe get to the next slide here, if you don't mind? There we go. Thank you. So this is our agenda today that we've laid out. We're going to just talk a little bit about the team, the scope of our audit, our plan timeline. Clearly, we want to get through the required communications as well. Talk a little bit about our plan, and then As always, we would love to get any feedback that that the committee may have, or other board members who are also on the call. So definitely want to leave some time at the end. Maybe just kind of as a precursor to this, we did have a call with Director Busick and Chair Boquette a few weeks back now, just to talk through in a lot more detail our plan as well, get direct feedback from them, similar process as we have in the past. So we have already gone through that, and again, we will kind of wrap up this process with a letter out to the full board as well, in case there are other board members that may have questions that aren't in attendance at the committee meeting today. So with that, Amy, if you want to put us, so I know we already introduced, we do have a little bit of a bigger team than just Amy and I on the call today. Myself, Chris, Amy, and Hunter have actually all been on RTD's audit since we've been working with you. So we've had the opportunity to really get to know your operations. We are planning to continue to work in our colleague partner, Keith Szymanski, who is also a partner in our national transit practice. So he will be likely coming out on site this year. He's familiar with RTD. He's been on some technical calls and stuff in the past, but we always like to make sure we're mixing in fresh perspectives and making sure that RTD, as a very valued client, has access to two partners at all times. So Kelly and team will have a little bit more FaceTime with Keith this year as we work to bring him onto the group as well. Next slide. So last year, I know we had put on here a little bit of detail about the external audit versus internal audit. I don't believe we have any new individuals in the roles this year, but maybe just a brief overview. And I know a lot of you are very familiar with what an external audit is and versus internal audit. We do have our illustrious internal auditors on the call with us. So that would be Matt and team. And they would be looking a lot more at operations, compliance with contracts, et cetera, as the audit plan that you all lay out together. An external audit, we're opining specifically on the deliverables that you see below. So we're opining on the financial statements and the dollars as of a point in time. So 12/31/2025 will be for this year's audit, and we are not providing an opinion on the internal controls over those financial statements. We do test the internal controls, but we do not provide an opinion on those. We are actually going to still be doing a federal compliance audit this year, so the thresholds have changed slightly for when a single audit is required, but RTD still significantly exceeds those, which I think is good news for you guys because that's only $1 million, and your federal spend is much over that. So we'll be performing a federal compliance audit again this year. We do a few agreed upon procedures reports, one that has been requested by the board in the past, which we'll continue to do, which is an agreed upon procedures report comparing the general manager's compensation per her contract to what was actually paid out during the year to make sure that those agree. And then the FTA requires agreed upon procedures reports related to the National Transit Database report that RTD submits to the FTA. So we will be working with your team to perform those procedures. Typically, we need to wait until RTD has prepared all of those reports, and then we'll go in and perform that. So we've worked really hard on a very condensed timeline with RTD. By the time you're able to get those reports set and ready, we kind of have it down to a science where we can get in a 2-week, maybe 3-week period and get it turned around really quickly so that it can meet the deadline that the FTA has set, which is April 30th. So we usually start those procedures probably early April, and we're dated and done in time to submit those to the FTA. And then not part of this audit, but just so that you're all aware, the salary trust audit is a separate audit, separately issued financial statements. However, some of the information from that audit does roll into RTD's financial statements. That is performed by a separate Plant Moran team. And that team, we maintain constant communication. In fact, I'm usually on a lot of those meetings just to make sure that everything's set and going as it needs to. But we've really been working hard with Kelly and her team as there's been transition in who is performing kind of the accounting and the benefits, et cetera, at Salary Trust. So we're working with their team right now to make sure that they're ready for the audit and they're good to go. But if you may recall from last year, and actually the last several years, there's been typically a slight delay in getting information that we need in order to complete the Salary Trust audit. And last year, that did significantly delay our issuance of our RTD's audit. So we're all aware of that. We're all working hard to make sure that does not happen again this year. However, in a year of transition, I do think there'll continue to be challenges as the third-party administrator transitioned during 2025. Again, I only bring this up as a matter of it could affect the timing of RTD's financial statements. So the board of Salary Trust is very involved and very engaged as well. And I know Kelly sits on that as well. So they want it done probably just as bad as us. So we'll continue to keep working on that. But I just bring it up as it does affect the timing of RTD's issuance. So to talk a little bit about the audit timeline, we right now, actually this week, started our interim procedures. So we've already done some planning, some brainstorming. We're having this meeting to gain additional information from you all. We'll get through our interim procedures this week, continue our planning, and then we usually will continue that risk assessment phase based on information we have learned during the year as well as at interim. And then we do start our field work where we'll be on site at RTD for a few weeks towards the end of February, early March. We always aim to wrap up in April. Sometimes the issuance goes later, like I said, due to RTD, due to Salary Trust. One thing I would like to say is, part of, I think, what makes and what has made the audit go smooth over the last several years and what we really appreciate about RTD and your team is the constant communication throughout the year. We never go more than 2 months without a scheduled call, updating on what's the latest at RTD, how everything's going. I know Kelly's team reaches out to us often when there's an unusual transaction or they have a question or they just want to make sure that, we have unified concurrence on something. And that really helps to ensure that the audit goes smooth and that there are no surprises during the audit process. So we really appreciate that, Kelly, from you and your team. And I think that has really helped the process over the years. With that, I am going to turn it over to Amy and have her talk a little bit about some of the required communications. Amy?
Thanks, Pam. Like Pam mentioned, I'll go over some of the required communications and then some of the elements of our audit plan as well. So when it comes to our audit, our responsibility is to express an opinion about whether the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects in conformity with US GAAP. So something a little bit new we wanted to touch on here on this slide is that there's a new accounting standard this year, GASB 102, certain risk disclosures. We don't expect this standard to have a significant impact to the district, just based on conversations we've had to date with management. However, we wanted to include it just for your knowledge, as well as I'll elaborate a little bit here. This standard does require the district to determine if there are any concentrations or constraints, whereas if certain criteria are met, this would result in an added disclosure to the financial statements. But again, as of now, we expect little to no impact as a result of this new standard. Moving into our audit plan, in order to plan an effective audit, we must identify significant risks of misstatement to the financial statements. To that end, we have identified 3 risks to address specific to RTD. The first being management override of controls. This is a standard risk you may have seen, and honestly, you'll continue to see that year over year due to the unique position that management holds. The second risk here is the proper recording of revenue. So we do focus heavily here on grant funding and federal revenue, which would include the accuracy and completeness of the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, or SEPA. And then lastly, we have the risk related to management's process for developing accounting estimates as it relates to the net pension liability. So in response to the risks that we have identified, we do plan procedures to address those risks. As related to management override, we do take a look at manual journal entries, and we do that every year. In addition, this year specifically, due to employee departures for individuals that were pretty heavily involved in the control structure, we'll also be reviewing and testing to make sure there were no gaps in controls during the year, as well as that proper and timely access updates to things like the general ledger and banking were made. Next, as it relates to revenue recognition, we'll review for any significant fluctuations, as well as assess whether grant funding was spent in accordance with the related agreements. I know Pam noted earlier during the scope slide there that we do perform a single audit over federal expenditures, and as part of that separate audit, we assess the completeness of the SEPA. And furthermore, we reconcile the expenditures reported on the SEPA back to the federal revenue recorded in the financial statements, which all ties together to address this risk. And then lastly, related to the net pension estimate, we will obtain and review support for the inputs, methods, and assumptions used by management in arriving at that particular estimate. So lastly, Pam stole my thunder a little bit for most of this slide, so I won't repeat it, but it just says that we will take a look at internal controls and processes, but we are not giving an opinion on the internal controls over financial reporting. We will communicate if we identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses of things of that nature to you all. And then lastly, the concept of materiality is inherent in our work. As you know, we don't look at every single transaction, but instead we put greater emphasis on items that could have a greater possibility of material error than those where the possibility of material errors may be a little more remote. And then lastly, just as we kind of opened with, an important part of this communication is just the opportunity to get information from you all that might be relevant to our audit. I know on the slide here is a few different areas we've outlined, but certainly if there is anything in these areas or anything that you may feel is relevant for us as related to the audit, feel free to reach out or bring that question to us now. But I do have on the last slide our contact information for both Pam, myself, and the senior manager, Chris Gilbert, as well.
Thanks, Amy. So I'm going to maybe Director Busick, I guess we'll go through you, but if there are any questions, we're more than happy to take questions.
Sure. Just want to ensure that that concludes your report.
Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And if anybody does have questions as we move forward, probably best to try to route those through the board office so that Mr. Kroll can ensure that all the other members of the committee are aware of the inquiries and what's happening with the responses. So with that, we're going to turn to questions and comments from the board. And I see John Olenberger with his hand up. Go ahead, John.
Great, thanks. And I apologize in advance because I feel like I asked this last year and just forgot the answer. So maybe you could just re-educate me. The agreed upon procedures for the GM compensation, what's the level of effort involved in that? I guess when I read that and look at it, I think, and I'm making up numbers here, but okay, the contract is that she makes 300,000, run a payroll report that says 300,000, check, we're good. So what is the complexities around that? I'm sure I'm underestimating that. And
Yeah.
Again, I feel like I probably asked this last year and just forgot the answer. So apologies for that.
No, that's okay. Actually, I don't think you asked this last year. So I think That's a good question. The level of effort is not a lot. It's a very minimal portion of our fee as well. A couple $1,000s. That being said, it is a little bit more complicated than just running a payroll report. And so there are quite a few complexities within the contract, but I would agree with you that in terms of level of effort, it's not something that takes us a week to do or anything like that. It's a pretty nominal piece of the overall contract.
Okay. So are there performance bonuses as part of that contract or something other than just salary, more or less?
Honestly, I do not have it memorized. So I don't want to misspeak as it relates to that. Jack, I saw you put your camera on, so I'm not sure if you were planning to say something, but
So John, I can circulate it to the committee, but the contract as it currently stands has a component for a performance assessment framework that needs to be approved each year by the board, and by virtue of that contract, it has to be approved by January 31st of each year. The contract has been subsequently amended such that the GM and CEO is currently not eligible for any performance-based payments unless the performance assessment framework is revised.
Okay.
So there were some components of it previously, but it's no longer a portion of it. And the performance assessment framework clearly details if the GM and CEO receives this amount of points in the annual evaluation process, that will correspond to a given base pay rate increase in the subsequent year.
Okay. So I guess the agreed upon procedures might be more along the lines of did the GM CEO meet these things to qualify for the thing rather than just running the payroll report and saying we paid this?
I think there's some added complexities too, because her agreement doesn't necessarily say she should be paid X. So it says she should be paid, and then on her anniversary, she could potentially get an increase based on this certain index. And on this date, there could be an increase based on this other item. So factoring in all of those things, you kind of have to back all the way up to, okay, the initial X was this. Now we've gone through 6 iterations of, indexes that we need to make sure we're put in place at the proper time and accumulated, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Okay.
It looks like the expert, Charlene, is has her hands up.
Charlene, why don't you go ahead?
Great, thank you, Chair. Charlene Flaggy, Chief People Officer. Just to add a little bit of clarity, my first question would be, is this review over the life of the contract? Because if yes, then yes, some of those COLA languages where there would be applicable. But if it was for a time period, i.e. last year, I think what Jack was saying, there's been a number of amendments to the contract where that trigger has been removed and replaced with something else. So it's not as simple, straightforward. There's also an addition in that amendment for what were called, I believe the actual title is executive perquisites. And so there are some additional benefits, compensatory benefits that are part of that contract that had certain conditions assigned to them. So I would assume that would also get captured in this audit to make sure that if it was this much in bucket A, that the agency actually followed through with its process to make sure that they met the terms of that language.
Great. And I see Matt Marino of Reuben Brown. I see Matt's hand up. Matt, would you like to add to this conversation? We can't hear you, Matt.
Yes, it would help if I unmuted.
That's
this
better.
review of the annual compensation of the general manager, CEO, was instituted several years ago, quite frankly, several general managers ago, just to make sure that the compensation that's being paid is correct, because there were executives in the past that took advantage of a district provided vehicle and other things that may or may not be a component of compensation now. And so we want to make sure that all of those different elements are being handled consistent with the agreement as currently construed. So.
Great. Thanks for all that clarification. John, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Very good. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Well, great. Amy and Pam, thank you so much for the presentation, and we look forward to continue work with you in the coming year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You bet. We're going to move on next to our recommended actions, and we have one recommended action on the agenda this afternoon. It's for the appointments of Director Michael Guzman and Director Matt Larson to the Independent Audit Committee. I am looking for a motion for the Independent Audit Committee to recommend to the Executive Committee the appointments of Director Michael Guzman and Director Matt Larson to the Independent Audit Committee for terms commencing on January 1, 2026 and running through December 31, 2027. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So who was the movement? I didn't catch that.
Came on
Jim?
camera and everything for you.
Bobby, was that you?
It was.
Thank you. Bobby Deschelle was the movement, and I think Peggy was the second. So at this time, I'd like to ask Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer, and Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office, to present this item to the committee. If you have a presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair Busick. And so this is for the appointment of Director Michael Guzman and Director Matt Larson to the Independent Audit Committee. And I will turn it over to Mr. Kroll to present this item.
Great. I don't have much more to say than what is contained in the board report. This is a process that was followed very similarly to last year when Director Busick was appointed to the Audit Committee. Technically, the board, has the final authority to make any appointments, but because this committee has expertise in the audit profession on it, there was some thought put into when designing the process for appointing people to this committee to leverage that expertise. And so rather than just having the executive committee decide on committee appointments, it was determined that it would be a value add to engage the audit committee in making a recommendation to the executive committee. Now, for the last 2 years, when we have made it to the stage where the audit committee has asked for its recommendation, we have only had directors in the running for appointment equal to the available appointments. So there's never really been an opportunity to kind of leverage the expertise in choosing between candidates. But in the future, there very well could be, and having this relatively independent body weigh in is seen as a benefit because it means that the process would be influenced by more objective opinion than potential, board subjective opinion on the candidates. And with that, we had 3 candidates initially, but 1 withdrew. And so now we have 2 candidates, Director Michael Guzman and Director Matt Larson, and short bios are included in the board report, and then every committee did receive the full application materials.
Great, thanks for that presentation. Are there any questions or comments from committee members? I don't see any. At this point, we will take the vote. Are there any no votes for the appointments of Directors Guzman and Larson? Seeing none, that recommended action passes unanimously. Michael, I see you're still here. Thank you very much for your interest and willingness to serve on the committee. And Director Larson, thank you very much for your willingness to serve. I know both of you have been great contributors to the board and will do so on this committee as well. So with that being done, let's move on to discussion items. We have 1. This is the internal audit update, and I would once again ask Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer, and Matt Marino, Chief Audit Executive at Reuben Brown, to introduce the item. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer. Our next item is the internal audit update as a discussion item, and I would like to introduce our Chief Audit Executive, Mr. Matt Marino from Rubin Brown, as well as Mr. Dave Haranick, the Manager of Business Advisory Services. He'll provide an overview of recent audit activities, management action plans, and the status of the internal audit plan. So, Mr. Marino, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I'm hoping you're seeing a cleaner view than I'm seeing on my multiple screens. Are you seeing a clean view of the slides?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is our internal audit update. I'm going to go through several different items. We did issue several reports, but I'll kind of touch on that as we go through here. So these are our current year current activities and updates. So current accomplishments and status. We are working on wrapping up the RTD Operations Service Development audit. We're working on just double checking the management action plans with the current management team that is in place and making sure that we refine some of those recommendations to not mix issues together so that we're clear on what the recommended action is. We also did a review of the P-card program, which I'll talk about later, and that was just recently issued. We also have since completed the staff scheduling and extra shift audit. It was not ready for this audit committee, so we would plan on bringing that to you very early in 2026. And then we have done a review of the Board of Directors expense reimbursement process, and that report was issued as well, and I'll talk about the results of that. And then we are in the early process of the contracted services for information technology services. And so that was kicked off and we're working on scoping that up. Next steps is we are getting ready to do a review of the parts inventory process and controls around that. We are also going to do a refresh on the enterprise risk assessment, especially because, well, you should do it quite often at regular intervals, but we've also had some key changes in leadership at the district. And so we thought it was a good time to get the input of people that are new, like CFO Mackey, and several other people to make sure that we are taking their view on where things might be and where they see the risks that we might need to mitigate as a result of our audit process. And then we're also regularly following up on management action plans. So if you look there on the right, you see the yellow and green dots. So kind of just really overall where we are. Slight delays on the RTD operations P-card program with slight delays, staff shift and extra shift with slight delays. Board of Directors went right as planned. I don't want to forget to thank our contractor, Dietrich and Associates. They had performed both the P-card and the board reimbursement process review. They did notify us that they are going to cease operations and therefore will no longer be able to provide services as part of this contract. So we will be in the process of looking to replace them with an adequate substitute subcontractor on the process, but we really want to thank them for their dutiful service since the beginning of the contract. They were a great partner to work with and really had nothing but great things to say, and they did a great job with both those audits. Contracted services were kind of more or less on time, and then parts inventory were really just starting. Any questions on this slide? So I presented this to the leadership team yesterday, kind of giving them a view of not only what have we accomplished, but what are we going to accomplish in the next several months. So coming up in the very near future, I've already touched on the IT services and parts inventory. We're going to look at the federal, state, and local regulations oversight and kind of get an understanding of how we are monitoring the different myriad of regulations that we get to comply with and make sure that we have eyes on all those and there's somebody doing monitoring and reporting back to the group on what's happening. So that'll be kind of looking at that. We're going to look at different activities that the transit police are taking on, whether that be inventory controls, policies and procedures around body-worn cameras. We're going to work to scope that out, but there's plenty of opportunities to review policies and procedures in an ever-growing part of the agency, as well as a somewhat complex part of the agency because it is gets headlines regardless of what happens in it. And so it's always good to make sure that our policies and procedures are right where we want them to be. We're also going to look at infrastructures and facilities preventative maintenance, capital asset management, human resources recruiting and hiring process review, service scheduling again, and then employee training review. And that kind of rounds us out for the rest of the year. And then we're constantly reevaluating plans. And then to the extent that management or you all have specific audits you'd like us to do, we can also fit those in. Any questions or concerns on the timing of the upcoming audits, and kind of just, is there any reason we should either bump some up, push some back, anything like that? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands going up, so that's good. So just reporting back on the management action plans that were due for follow-up. So as you can see, there's different management action plans in different areas. So we have the project name, the observation number, the title, and then the target date. And in many instances, you see a original target date and then a struck through target date. Usually that was a revised target date, either due to a change in plan or change in staffing or whatever that would necessitated a change of the target date. So we do have several different management action plans that we're still needing responses for. So if you see the status there in the risk rating, the ones that say response needed, we're still waiting on either obtaining the response and or the supporting documentation to close out that response. So it's not in all instances that they're not responsive at all, but they could be owing us supporting documentation to fully close that out, if that makes sense. And then if it says closed, we've requested the documentation to close out the recommendation, make sure that the matter had been remediated and the process has been modified and the process has been put in place, and then we close it out and have moved forward with that. We also have several with regard to security incident reporting. Any questions on the management action plan follow-ups? So the first audit I'm going to talk at the high level is the P-card program review. And so this was one of the audits that was kind of pushed up in the audit process as a recommendation of the leadership team, just because it was a ongoing project to reevaluate the processes regarding P-cards. When we reviewed the P-card process, it had been several years since the actual P-card policy had been updated. To be specific, it's been since 2016. So it's due for a refresh. And so as we move towards replacing Oracle as our accounting or ERP system and evaluating further technologies, it's always good to look at the current status of process and evaluate what is working well in the process and what might require some changes. And so there were instances where we have some control over different purchasing codes that a pre-card cannot purchase with, but it's not position specific. For example, if somebody's in a repair function and they only need to be buying parts through a parts provider and they would not need to incur meals, travel, or entertainment, many cards do allow you to limit by card, by role, the different purchases that somebody can make. And so that is something we are not currently using at the district that we are going to evaluate. We also had some recommendations on making sure that we aren't paying tax on things that we are buying because we shouldn't be paying tax. And also if we're buying goods or services, oftentimes people had bypassed the process to review whether we had an existing agreement or contract in place to buy that good or service, and they went ahead and did it on the P card. And so just making sure that that gets reviewed back and verified. And then there was also some instances where the supporting documentation was not sufficient. Very, very low error rate, but it is some error rates that we wanted to highlight, especially as we look at evaluating technologies to help us improve that process. So really overall, the rating was a needs improvement. We had 6 moderate and 4 low process improvement recommendations, and management has provided their management action plans with regard to those. Any questions with regard to P-card? The next one, we did review how the board of directors reimbursement process works. And so this was also something that was performed by Dietrich. And so we were looking at the policies and procedures. We're also looking that the expense complied with the policies and procedures. We're also looking at the timeliness of the submission and the what sort of data was being turned in with regard to that. And so we did have several recommendations with regard to this. We did issue an overall satisfactory rating for it. So great job, Jack and his team in the board office to make sure, and the accounting team to make sure that we're not too far in the weeds on it, but we did have 2 moderate recommendations and 3 low process improvement. Really, the main one I want to highlight is maybe the timeliness of getting our expenses into the board office to make sure that we can adhere to that policy and make sure that we're not nearing up any tax-related guidance that might necessitate that being treated differently than a normal reimbursable expense. So really, overall, nothing alarming, but just some cleanup to make sure that we handle that in the most appropriate way and in compliance with our policies. Any questions or comments with regard to the Board of Directors expense audit? Okay, I won't go through the definitions because we're a little bit of old hat at this. Many of you are veterans at looking at these internal audit summaries, but we expect that 2026 will be a very busy year of audits, and we will have plenty of audits for you to review. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Matt. Are there any questions or comments for Matt Marino regarding the internal audit update? No, seeing none. Great job, Matt. Very thorough. Thank you for presenting that to us this afternoon. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? Seeing no other matters, we'll move on. The next meeting date is going to be February 12th, 2026, where the committee will hold elections for chair. I'm sorry, Peggy Catlin, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank everybody for their good work on this audit committee, and I wish the new board members all the best. We had a great slate of 3 candidates, but I trust that this audit committee will be in good hands moving forward, and it's been a pleasure serving on it and on its inaugural membership, I guess. So I just wanted to say that and say goodbye to everybody.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Peggy. And I was just getting to some comments about you and Director Deschelle. So given that our next scheduled meeting is not until February of 2026, I want to take a moment now to recognize the work of the committee members, Deschelle and Catlin. They're both now former RTD directors, and they each committed to serving out their audit committee terms despite their terms on the RTD board ending. I'm grateful that they continued to serve this committee even after their time as a director had come to an end, as they brought a wealth of knowledge and insight to this committee. In fact, they were both instrumental in the creation of this committee, and our internal audit structure. RTD is indebted to their service. I wish you both the best, and on behalf of the committee wishes you both the best as well. I also want to thank the other members of our committee, committee members Brendel and committee members Ohlenberger. You two have been on this committee for a while now and have done tremendous work and been a great asset to the RTD, and I thank you for all of your hard work as well. Finally, I want to thank all the RTD staff that has been instrumental in making this audit committee a success, from Kelly Mackey and her team to Jack Kroll and his team, and all of the other staff members that contributed to make these meetings run smoothly and efficiently. Thank you all for everything you've done. Anything from anybody else before we close it out? I see no other hands raised at this time. I will adjourn the meeting at 2. Oh, wait a minute. I see hands. Jack Kroll.
Hey, sorry to keep us all here. I did want to provide a status update. I don't think it should come as news to anyone, but we did usher through Jim Brendel's reappointment to the committee for a 3-year term commencing in January of 26 and running through December of 2028. The plan was to kind of bring that reappointment forward with the other 2 appointments, but we had to make a special exception for Director Peggy Catlin to continue serving on the committee, so we just did it then. So Jim is signed up for another 3 years on the RTD Audit Committee. So
Yikes. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
That's great. Anybody else? Any other comments? Bobby DeShaw, I need to hear something from you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure to get to serve, to get to do the do the ad hoc audit committee under Director Busick. I think, well, you were chair of the board. And then to really see this come to fruition where it's now really a full running machine. To our internal and external auditors, thank you for wading through it with us, stumbling through it with us, arguably, as we got this up and off the ground. It was a real project. It's one of the things I'm most proud of we did while I was on the board. And it's really pretty amazing to see people wanting to do it, seeing it as an integral part of what we're doing, seeing it help drive work at the agency is really, really special and amazing. So thank you all.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks so much. And Peggy, your hand's up again. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to pile on, but I wanted to say that the progress that has been made over the past several years compared to what it was like when I got on the board nearly 8 years ago is just extraordinary. So kudos to the team. Kudos to our Reuben Brown partners, and they've done a remarkable job. And just, I mean, for me, just getting completed audits was huge progress. So it's really rewarding to see. And I echo Bobby DeShell's comments that it's one of the things that I'm most proudest of for my tenure on the board as well. So thank you all.
Thanks, Peggy. Matt Marino, you're up.
Last one, it won't be very long, but I will also just want to report back that the leadership team is very supportive at looking at as internal audit as a process improvement arm and very eager to use that as an arm to help improve operations at the district. We're past the point where we're just trying to get this thing up and going and flying. The plane can fly. Let's you make it fly how we would like to. And the entire leadership team was very supportive of embracing the process and being very collaborative with us. And we want to report back to you as an audit committee that is well on its way. So.
Thanks very much, Matt. Thanks for all that. And Michael, welcome aboard. Thanks for your interest in serving on this committee. And with that, and seeing no further discussion, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 2:48 p.m.